One car is a legend among driving enthusiasts, but another rival has emerged. Still, Ford insists front-wheel drive cars can handle, and it's a message worth repeating. Volkswagen has been saying as much for decades, and Honda has been proving it. Could a crossover really take the fight to these performance machines? Or is this a battle only all-wheel drive can win? So we're comparing all 8 of these cars in a massive shootout on the street and track.
And what exactly do they all have in common? Well, they all cost less than 30 grand and they're all a hell of a lot of fun to drive.
Welcome to the 2014 AutoGuide.com under $30,000 performance car shootout.
We love track tests, and while they are the ultimate evaluation of a car's performance, we also understand that very few of you get the chance to take your car to the track. And those of you who do, probably not as often as you'd like.
So first up, let's see how these cars perform on the street. The WRX is the only sedan in our comparison, and it's the only vehicle with all-wheel drive. And the all-wheel drive system is proper all-wheel drive with 50-50 power being distributed to front and rear. One of the more expensive vehicles here, this has the most power and you can feel it on the road. Engage a gear, wait for the turbo to spool up, and this car just rockets away. Nothing else comes close to giving you the power sensation of this car. Handling is much improved on the new WRX, although it's not quite as engaging as, say, the Focus ST or even the Fiesta ST. But this car is a lot more comfortable to drive, and it's still really practical, and it has a massive back seat. Already fun to drive on a day like today, when the road conditions deteriorate, this car becomes even better. So the WRX may not be the sharpest handling car here, it is the most powerful, it will drive through anything, and it's practical and comfortable. I think this could be a serious competitor in the shootout.
So here we are in the Honda Civic Si, and I must say, I really do like the suspension tuning on this car on the road. It's got a nice compliant ride. It still feels firm and somewhat sporty, but it's not jarring like some of the other cars in the competition. All the cars in this competition have manual gearboxes, but of the 8, I will say that I like the Civic SI's gearbox the best. It's really direct, nice short throws, very light action. It's just the way a manual gearbox should be. A couple of things about the SI that I don't particularly like. First being the seating position. It's really quite high. It just gives you that economy car feel instead of a sports car feel. I suppose the other area where the Civic Si falls a bit short compared to the competition is low RPM engine performance. This is really an engine designed to be wrung out to redline, but it doesn't have that mid-range big punch of torque like the turbo cars do. Honda has firmed up the SI suspension quite a bit, but it still feels pretty soft and pretty understeer prone compared to the competition. But to really find out how it performs, we'll have to wait and see how it does at the track.
The Volkswagen GTI is one of the original sport compact cars, and for 2015 there's an all-new one. If this shootout was about the best all-around car, the GTI would be hard to beat, but this is mostly about being fun to drive, and here the GTI gives up a bit to some of its competitors. It gives up some of the rawness found in the Fiesta ST and the Focus ST, and despite the engine at 210 horsepower being underrated, it still doesn't have the initial sort of thrust off the line that you can feel on the Focus or the WRX. The GTI handles really well. In fact, it may be one of the better handling cars here, but a lot like the Focus, it does it almost too well. It's so refined and just goes about its business without any drama. There's none of that fun you find in like the FRS or the Fiesta or the MX-5. And then there's these seats. A lot of staffers complain about them, and it's more than just the plaid explosion on them. The comfort isn't quite there, and there's no real lateral support in the corners. The GTI does have one of the best sounding engines and quite possibly is the most practical car, but when it comes to fun, it's just missing something. It's still engaging to drive, but it just doesn't give you that big stupid grin that some of the other cars do.
So here we are in the Fiesta ST, and yes, the ride quality is pretty harsh, but who cares? This thing is so much fun to drive. It just makes so much torque. It's got so much character. I really do love this car. I'm not sure how fast the Fiesta is going to be around the racetrack yet, but on the street, it feels like the fastest car here because it's just got all that mid-range torque, and it's such a light, nimble little car. You really do feel like you're strapped to a little stick of dynamite. On the downside, I do find the seating position a little bit odd. You sit up quite high, the seats just pinch me in all the wrong places, and the shifter is so low I find I'm really having to reach for it more than I do in the other cars. With the lowest starting price of any car in this competition, you do feel like you're in a less expensive car. The plastics in here are just a little bit cheaper than everything else. Interior complaints aside, this car really is an absolute hoot to rip around on the street, and I can't wait to get it out on the track.
I'll admit, the MX-5 is one of my favorite cars to drive. In fact, in our score sheets, it ranked near the top in the fun to drive categories from all our staffers. The problem is, this is pretty much a toy. This car can be used all year round. I've done it before, all winter long, without an issue. The problem is, if you have a family, there's nowhere to put your kids, and if you want to go to the grocery store or buy anything from a big box store, where are you going to put it? That said, this shootout is about fun to drive, and the MX-5 has it in spades. Everyone uses the cliche that this car fits you like a glove, and although I hate to say it, that's really true. You get in it and you just feel like the MX-5 is going to do whatever you want. The gearing is so tight and the engine is so flexible that you always have power, and this car feels twice as fast as it really is. And the handling. This may not be the quickest around corners, but it's probably the most fun. You just turn the wheel and the car just goes wherever you want it to. It's amazing how responsive this car is. The most underrated feature of the MX-5 though is probably how comfortable it is. This most likely is the softest sprung car in the group, and you can feel it on the road. Bumps are just swallowed up with no problem in this car, but it doesn't lose any of its chassis finesse. A lot of that has to do with this also being the lightest car. The MX-5 though also wins one less impressive category. This is the most expensive as tested vehicle. Sure, you can get it a little cheaper than what we have, but that's the soft top 5-speed manual and no rear limited slip differential. All things you would probably want if you're ever going to take this to a track. The MX-5 is the automotive embodiment of fun. The problem is, it's not that practical, it's not that cheap, and it's not that fast. For some though, that doesn't matter, me included.
We're now in the Focus ST, and it does have a pretty firm ride quality too, but it's definitely more compliant than its little brother, the Fiesta. It's also quite a bit more powerful. The Fiesta really does punch hard, but this thing screams. It's got more top end, more mid-range torque. It's really impressively quick out here on the streets. Other than the GTI, I will say that I think the Focus has the nicest interior. Really high quality materials in here. The ergonomics though for me are still a little bit iffy. I don't like how high I sit in here. And although the shifter falls to hand much better than it does in the Fiesta, I still find some of the switchgear to be a little bit tricky to figure out. As far as the fun to drive aspect goes, the Focus ST really is a lot of fun, and it's because they've done those fancy torque vectoring tricks to make this car oversteer and not understeer. And as a result, on the street especially, I find it to be really fun to drive. Not sure if that will all play out as much on the racetrack, but we'll find out soon.
The Juke Nismo RS is a bit of an oddball in this group because it's not really a sport compact car, it's more of a sporty crossover, I guess. But the Nismo treatment is more than just a body kit and badges. They've really done a lot to the mechanics, and the RS takes things up another level. This little 1.6 liter engine is making 215 horsepower. We keep commenting on how this engine feels way more powerful than any 1.6 liter should. It may not sound that great, but you get on the accelerator and the little juke rips down the road. And Nissan's tried their hardest to make this sporty, and I'm happy they haven't absolutely killed the ride quality. On roads it is tolerable. The problem is, it is a crossover and it will only handle so well. To try to make it feel like the Juke handles better than it does, Nissan's given it really quick steering. You just give it a little push and the Juke instantly responds. And then to show you how sporty it is, Nissan also put in authentic Recaro seats that are about as raw as you can get in any car these days. Unlike a lot of the other cars in the comparison though, all these parts don't really mesh together to make an engaging car. The Nismo just kind of feels like someone took a Juke and souped it up, which is pretty much what happened. Unique looking, this torque steering high riding crossover is fun to drive, but maybe not the way a lot of people would like it to be.
So now we're in a real driver's car. This is the Scion FRS and I'm seated low. I feel connected to the chassis, the steering wheel's in the perfect position, the shifter's in the perfect position. This thing is just dialed in for driving. I will say that on the road, the suspension does feel pretty stiff, but you know what? I like that. I can feel every pebble. I know exactly where this car is on the road. It communicates to me the way I want a sports car to. This isn't the fastest car in a straight line here though, not by a long shot, and that's because this naturally aspirated Boxer just does not have a lot of torque. You've really got to wind it out and use all 7,400 RPM. That could be fun, but when you're trying to cut through traffic, it does maybe hold you back just a little bit. Although Scion has improved the quality of the interior quite a bit, there's nicer HVAC controls, nicer material on the seats, and they've even added these little knee pads. It's still not the best interior in this competition, not by a long shot. Some of the plastics in here still do look a little bit low rent. You know what though, once you start to turn corners in this car, you forget about any complaints about interior quality, because this thing is just a ton of fun to blast down a twisty road in.
I'll come right out and say it. The MX-5 is one of my favorite cars to drive, period.
Same for me, but with the FRS. In fact, I like the Scion so much, I'm building one to race at Targa, Newfoundland.
But neither of those cars won the street section of our comparison test. That honor goes to the funky little Fiesta ST.
We're keeping the rest of the results a secret until the next installment, where we'll show you how these cars really perform on the track.